Where are we putting our infrastructure? Public-private partnerships. People have absolutely have conversations about PPPs. Public-private partnership. It is public. It is privatization. It is partnership. It is private privatization. Public procurement. PPP, public procurement proposal. PIP, public investment proposal. Privately initiated partnership. What are those things? Very much confusion. The Director General of the Public-Private Partnership Directorate in the National Treasury is Christopher Kirigua, and he's our guest. Christopher, good morning.
Good mornings.
How are you doing?
Good, very good. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you. Keeping well?
Very well.
We're going to talk a lot about PPPs, just seeking to understand PPPs from you guys who actually handle PPPs. But before we get there, City will welcome you with the day's proverb. But before he does, we saw announcements a couple of months ago that you have been appointed as an ambassador.
Yes, my friend.
So why are you still here? Why are you still doing PPPs?
We're on the route. We're en route to Washington. There were a few hitches towards the end in terms of contracting, but I think we've got into a settlement. Within the next 10 days, I should be on the way to Washington.
Did you hear they have a new president?
Yes, I had. Yes, I had. It was an interesting day yesterday.
Just checking.
So what is your role for those who have been living under a rock? What's your role coming in the next 10 days?
In Washington?
Yes.
So I'll be the Deputy Chief of Mission in Washington, D.C., and also I've been asked to lead the National Treasury as a Chief Representative of the National Treasury in Washington.
So you'll be dealing with those Bretton Woods institutions.
Indeed.
Okoh.
Indeed.
All right.
To scale up financing for Kenya.
Very
and
good.
Also investments.
Congratulations, my friend.
Thank you.
City?
Yes.
The proverb.
Very good. Our proverbs for this week are from the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Okay.
Moving forward, our proverbs will be from Africa south of the Sahara. A message from a dead man is poison for the one who doesn't respect it.
A message from a dead man is poison to the one who doesn't respect it.
Yes.
What's your interpretation of this one?
It's interesting. I'll change the dead man to an angel. When the angels speak to you and you do not listen, be wary of the outcome. Yeah. So I'll say it's critical to listen to the silent voices that are sent to you. Yeah. To ensure that you don't miss the bigger picture. What's your thought?
Perfect. I cannot add to what you've said because it is absolutely true.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
Listen to the small little voices. And those ones are usually on the left side. The one on the right.
Those are the crazies.
Sondo, I listen to you.
Please, let's stick with that.
Agreed.
Nice one. Nice one.
City Pole.
Don't even.
Oh, no. By the way,
I will listen to her.
It is actually wise for you to listen to her. Yes.
And so you listen to him.
No, so I will listen to you because I know you've listened to her. And Eric will listen to all of us.
Yes. So now, the Directorate of PPPs at the National Treasury. It was established a couple of years ago. We heard of your appointment and we've heard of PPPs. What are PPPs? What is a PPP and what is not PPP?
Okay, PPPs it's a framework. It's a framework to scale up investments, public investments. Generally, if a state has a lot of money, a state is very rich, for example, like Saudi Arabia, you don't need PPPs because you can just go build infrastructure. You've got enough resources to do the investment that you require in a country. However, knowing that the environment we play in Kenya, and not just Kenya actually, because you look at Saudi Arabia, as I've just talked about, they're now looking to get also into PPPs, which was not the case in the past because of the limited resources which are available. In Kenya, PPPs actually, I'll say this, they did not start 3 years ago when I started. You just had more noise about PPPs and you got to understand more PPPs, obviously, when we changed the legislative framework in 2020. However, PPPs have been there in Kenya since 2009. The only challenge that you had is nothing got implemented. There were no projects. that got implemented until actually between 2009 and 2020. Only one project had been implemented. I'm not sure you're going to rate that as success, but clearly in about 10 years, having one project, it was not working.
One implemented. How many signed?
There was one other that was signed, but we ended up having to cancel it.
Okay.
Yeah, which was an Nkuruma Summit road. So PPPs is a framework to enable that private sector to come support government in a framework whereby both parties win. Yeah, to develop public infrastructure. Now PPPs require the projects have to have commercial viability. Yeah. Because the private sector, they're not coming to build these projects because they love our country. They're coming to these projects purely to make money. Yeah. Now, what is the role of the directorate and what is the role of government? The role of government is to ensure that these projects are done at an affordable rate. They bring value for money. And also a very critical portion is to ensure the environmental social impact analysis of each project is well captured. Yeah, that is actually a much better approach even compared to the normal public procurement.
Yeah.
Most PPPs actually require to access funding from commercial banks. And actually that's over 99% of all PPPs have to access money from commercial banks, and commercial banks ensure that the ESIA, which is environmental social impact analysis, are done as per Equator principles, which was a set of rules which was set by very many international banks and also IFC to set up the standards of what is expected on each project, especially to ensure that the social acceptability and you mitigate any environmental impacts each project brings to the table.
Okay. So this private sector company is coming into a PPP and looking at commercial viability. It wants to make its money back. What does it bring to the table?
So the private companies actually bring the capital.
So they bring the money.
They bring the money.
Okay.
Yeah. So the private. Okay, this is what happens on a typical PPP. The priorities of the PPP are set by the government, not by the private sector. So we come up and select the projects we want to do as a government. Yeah, and list those projects. Do the feasibility studies. After we do the feasibility studies, send the projects to market and get the private parties to participate. So the private parties bring in the expertise to build the project. They bring the expertise to run the project, and they also bring to the table the financing for the vehicles to build the infrastructure.
So then, by design, a PPP contractor, shall we call them contractor or partner?
Partner is better.
So a PPP partner will run this thing.
Absolutely.
They'll build it. They'll have to run it, and during that running period is when they're recouping their investment.
Absolutely.
And by charging the public for using the infrastructure.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay. You mentioned that they have to use commercial banks, for example. That would give the illusion that they're getting money from a local entity. But you've also said that this private party who comes at the end of this brings their own funds. So how does the commercial bank, I'm assuming it's a local one, how does that come into play in this whole process?
Thanks. Very good question. And what happens on each PPP, the private party goes to raise, there's an equity portion where they bring their own money, which is actually hard cash they bring in from their accounts, which is normally about 30%, and they finance 70%. From banks. Yeah. So the banks are normally commercial banks, but what we do as a treasury, we ensure that the private party gets the most affordable financing available. In some cases, we also facilitate bringing them blended finance, like working with partners like Muga, which is part of the World Bank, who will help the private sector lower the cost of financing and also get extended tenures to make the projects more affordable.
Okay.
So it's not local bank.
Actually, the preference should always be local banks, and the reason being, you ensure that the financing is done mostly in local currency, so you do not transfer exchange rate risks to the consumers.
Okay. So 70% of that is now the loan.
Yes.
And most preferably being sourced from a bank or a consortium of banks. And so that when we're paying, it's all shilling denominated.
Absolutely.
Through and through. And the 30% is their equity, is the money that they put in.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But the thing I'd like to add to that,
Yes.
we've got a very big challenge, and we've been working actually very well with a number of the local banks to scale them up on project finance, because it's not an area many of them have been focusing on. Yeah, so you'll see the likes of like the bank you earlier mentioned, like Stanbic. Stanbic has a very good project finance team, so you'll see Stanbic doing a lot of PPP transactions compared to many other local banks.
Okay.
What is it about what is it about project financing that makes it different from the sort of financing that we are used to? Like, we understand the mortgages. You want to buy a house, you want to build a house, that sort of thing, we understand. In essence, I'm asking, this term, project financing, what does it actually mean? Because it seems to be at the heart of the finance that is required for many of these projects. And what we think it is and what it is seem to be different.
Very, very good questions. Let me start. Project financing, you look at the project on a standalone. Yeah, it's similar. So you look at a project and look at the viability. So the project, in a standalone basis, needs to generate enough cash flows for it to pay for itself. Yeah, a typical loan, like for example, a credit card. Yeah, all they look at it's your pay slip, and they give you a card. In a project finance, for example, you're going to build a road. You need to do traffic studies. The banks need to be comfortable with those studies that you do. Yeah, you need to look at the environmental impact. Right? What are you cutting off trees as you build this road? Yeah. If you're cutting off trees, are you replacing them? Yeah. Equator principles actually require you to do that. Yeah. Now, many private parties will even attempt to avoid some of these things. Yeah, but it's a role of people in roles like mine to ensure that these things are implemented in a proper fashion, and also the contracting authorities.
Right.
Okay, our law and the approach to PPPs. How many ways can a PPP be initiated and contracted according to our law?
To our law. So there are 4 methods of procurement. The first one is a competitive method. The second one is restricted. The third one is direct procurement, and the fourth one is a PIP, which has raised a lot of attention in this country recently.
So let's go by each. Competitive. What does that mean? That we have to advertise and say we want to build a dam in Karimeno, and this dam will serve X number of people, and and then you're inviting people to bid for it. Yeah.
Yep.
And then what happens? So how do you go through now the process of evaluating?
No. You started the other way around. You first start with a feasibility study.
Okay.
Because you first need to ensure that it has got for a PPP. A PPP is not a social infrastructure. You need to ensure that it's got commercial viability.
Okay.
So there are loads of studies that need to be done to ensure the commercial viability. That when you advertise it, it will attract the level of investments, and investors can see that they can recoup their money in the period set in the concession period. Yeah. So on a competitive process, which is similar to a restricted and also direct procurement, and I'll explain the difference between the three. You start off with a feasibility study, evaluate the project, look at the volumes. Yeah, because many of these things, like for example, if it's a road infrastructure, you look at the traffic volumes that will use the roads. You look at the affordability. Will tolling be, if you're going to toll the road, will people afford 200 shillings on tolling, right? So you look at the entire scope, and then look at the environmental impact. Are you going to be cutting through? You're going to be cutting trees, like I said. Are you going to be cutting through a national park? Remember the challenges we had with the SGR, but that was not a PPP.
Yeah.
So you look at the various aspects of the road, and once you get a feasibility study and the project is feasible, you go to market. Yeah. But before you go to market, you first the contracting authority. So let's say, for example, it's Kenya. Kenya comes to they run the feasibility study. We support them during the process. They submit it now formally to the directorate. We take it to the committee. The PPP committee reviews it, approves it, or sends it back. Thereafter, when they go to market, and after they go to market, and we get the responses, we evaluate them, After evaluating those responses, we take them to the PP committee back again. Thereafter, we approve it for negotiations. It goes for negotiations.
So the negotiations haven't started. There's been two approvals.
Approval
First,
for the feasibility.
There's approval of the feasibility study, and then you tell the contract, all right, go ahead and advertise.
Absolutely.
And then they receive bids. They bring the bids again to you for approval.
Absolutely.
And so what are you approving at this particular point?
So you receive the bids are evaluated. So the evaluation outcome is approved by the PPP committee. Once that evaluation outcome is approved and the selected preferred bidder is selected, it now goes to
back to Kenha.
It goes back to Kenha and the PPP directorate for negotiations.
Okay.
So a negotiation is conducted. The negotiation outcome goes back to the committee for approval. Thereafter, the PP committee approves the negotiation outcome and the concession agreement. Then it goes back to Kenha and goes to the AG for concurrence before it's signed off.
So two things here. One is that Kenha did not do the evaluation. It is a PPP committee that is doing the evaluation.
No, it's the evaluation is done through a project. There's a project team between Kenha, various government institutions that come together to evaluate.
So all of them are involved.
Yes,
it's not just one entity, not the entity that is involved in evaluating.
No,
so there are others. The directorate is involved, the ministry,
authority,
the contracting authority, and all.
Yeah.
Okay. When you go back now into all those negotiations, and then you go to the National Treasury, at what point does the public get to know that this thing is happening?
So during the feasibility study stage, when a project goes through, on the competitive side,
yes,
an ESI is done, environmental social impact analysis. Yeah, the social impact analysis involves stakeholder management and public participation. Yeah, that's on a competitive process. Yeah, so the public gets to know about it. And if you look at the Nakuru Mall Summit, remember the road?
Yes.
Yeah, there was a lot of public participation. Yeah, across the entire corridor. Yeah, during the when the project was going through project evaluation. Yeah.
Okay. This all takes place during competitive. That's so. When you talk about restricted, direct, and PIP, do you have the element of public participation like you do with the competitive process?
So for the other two, restricted and direct, they go through the same process because you start with the feasibility study,
right,
which includes the ESIA.
Yeah.
Right. But now when you get to a PIP, now this is the one that gets a bit more complex. Yeah. PIP. So we receive. Actually, let me say this before I joined Treasury. Yeah. My team used to receive PIPs like I'll say you have heard that phrase. When you throw spaghettis on the wall, you see how many can stick.
Yes.
Yeah. That was the arrangement.
Yeah.
Right. So everyone was just throwing a lot of.
Everyone was just PIPs were landing at the directorate all the time.
Eric, you never sent one.
I should have. Eh?
These guys have
it's
a
too
rock
late.
company.
It's too late. So no, let me. We're receiving a lot of PIPs, and so many of them actually don't stick.
Okay.
Yeah. And actually, what we did on the 2020 law, we created a project review fee, right? And the reason for that is each PIP comes with a stack of documents, which is almost this size. Yeah. So imagine you're having government officials are constantly just reviewing documents, and most of them will not stick on the wall.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was getting back to your question.
So much time spent there.
Yeah. So you're spending a lot of time. So what we did is we created that, which deterred a lot of many of these PIPs. Yeah. And PIPs, because you have no idea if it's going to go through or not. You do not start with the project, public participation at the beginning. So you first receive it. If it makes sense, right, through the first level of evaluation, we tell the project company to go now do a proper feasibility study, right, which is called the project development stage. Yeah? During the project development stage, they're also supposed to do ESIA on their own. Right? And what they do is they check the social acceptability. Now, because of the challenges we have faced recently, especially on the transactions, when you look at JKI, especially JKI, yeah? normally would do the feasibility, will do the public participation or public accessibility, during the third stage, immediately after negotiations, before you award any transaction, right? Now, there's something that we've seen that we can actually improve the process to get much more public acceptance on what we do, is to bring this element that we're planning to take to the third stage to ensure it's completed in the second stage.
Which one?
The public participation.
Okay.
Yeah. So during the feasibility study, when the private sector company is going to do the feasibility study, we have actually strengthened the process, and we want to actually legislate it that during the second process of evaluation, there's a strong there's a strong environmental social impact analysis is done, which includes a public participation.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
One more, then we take a break.
Yeah. You talk about the different processes. So from the outside looking in, and you don't really get to look in really, but just from what you've explained is that there's so many levels that this thing has to go through. By the time it comes out, one would assume that due diligence has been done, the feasibility studies have been carried out, every check that needs to be made has already been done. So, it's worth its weight by the time it comes through the process. And if that is the case, then why do we have such few cases of these projects that have actually been carried out and implemented?
That's actually the best question I've had. Let me say why. It's actually a challenge. This is not a challenge for Kenya. No, let me tell you, including Nigeria.
Of course.
Yeah?
Let's not go there, but okay.
It's all across our lovely continent. When you look at all contracting authorities, 99%, even ministries, the number one preference for them to implement projects is using budget.
Yes, budget.
You want to ask exchequer?
Donor and
Yes.
donors.
Exactly. Donor funding. So where does PPP come in? Bottom
Yeah.
on the tail, right? So with that in place, this is what. So many people, what do they refer to PPP for implementation? Actually, not the best projects.
Yeah.
So do they have commercial viability?
Maybe not.
No.
Thank you. Majority do not have commercial viability. Now, as you've asked, when very many implemented, if you look at it, remember we talked about the success rate. We had only had between 2009 and 2020 was
One.
Yeah. Yeah. We've done about 10 now. Yeah. 10 projects.
Huh?
Yeah. 10 projects.
Between 2020 and now?
My friend, we've not been sleeping.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Now, let me go here. The fiscal space in Kenya right now has what made now people look at PPPs a bit differently. Yeah. And I would like to give a lot of credit to our CS, our new CS, John Buddy. Yeah. And obviously the PPP committee. Yeah. Because the focus, because right now, if you've got a commercially viable project, and I can give you a number of them that we borrowed actually. So we eat our fiscal space, on commercially viable projects. And when we go to social projects, like for example, health, hospitals, education, where's the money to do it?
Iko kwa barabara.
Which was or a very good project, which especially like you look at the ICT sector, a lot of the ICT projects are actually commercially viable on a standalone basis. But you also need to be careful about this on PPPs. Is also on ICT projects, you need to be careful on security projects to ensure how you mitigate data breaches and get
controls.
The controls put in place. So that private data does not go into
individual hands.
Individual hands.
Private companies' hands.
Absolutely.
There's also the other bit of mortgaging the country. PPPs are long term. So this road is owned by Kirigua and Company. The other one is owned by CT and Eric. The other one is owned by Ndu and Her Royal Highness. For 30 years, 25 years. So does Kenya own anything, Bwana? Chris, you are a banker by profession. You and money, you understand money like this. Yeah, when you hear money, you can understand it. I'm sure you'll understand when I say Tala, right? And digital lending. And what that means and how that has digital lending and what that has done to a segment of the market. True? Now, here's the thing. Tala has been in the market for 10 years. They started as Mkopo Rahisi. For the last 10 years, they actually now moved into Tala, and they've moved even outside of Kenya. They've gone to the Philippines, they've gone to Mexico, and they're doing very well. 500 million shillings has been lent in the Kenyan market alone in those 10 years, over 500 million shillings. So there are those that have benefited from Tala, and there are those who have heard of Tala. They've had the negative perceptions about the mobile lending segment, and then they're like, this is not for me. Which is why the central bank came in and started regulating these organizations. And also the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner comes in and says, we've got to license you as a data processor and all the others, and you've got to apply for that. So now there's a bit of regulation, which is why the perception of many people that Tala is for, students, young people who just want money and they don't repay, needs to start shifting into actually Tala is for you and I. Tala will come in handy when you and I are thinking about our financial and thinking about our money, just like PPPs and PIPs. And it's one of the ways in which you actually are able to access money. So think Tala, download it today on Google Play Store, and you will be able to enjoy it. It's a simple registration process. As we went to the break, you said since 2009 and 2021 PPP project had been implemented. Since then, you have signed up 10 PPP projects. Let's start with the one. Which one? Do we know it?
The one is lot. It's a road. It's called lot 33, going to Imaroro. It is 91 kilometers road that was done under the Annuity program.
Then going to Imaroro Road.
Yeah, it's you remember the Annuity program. So the Annuity program, there was one that was done. It was not a typical project finance. It was the private party had a very strong balance sheet, so he was able to fund it through corporate lending.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was done.
Okay.
Yeah.
This 10 that we've signed, which ones are they? 10.
There are many. We've got. We've just done the defense housing, which you've heard about. We've done another 2 annuity. We've actually had another 2 annuities, but there's a consideration about cancellation of them because of the change of direction at the State Department. We've had 3 power projects. Yeah, we've got this project Selu, which is the Galana project, which was started off by Twiga. Yeah.
What are those, man? Like, what is the annuity project? What are annuities?
So annuity comes in from the annuity fund. Yeah, so it's the annuity fund. So there are 2 ways you pay for PPP project. It's either through a user base, or so a user base is whereby you create a tool, or you set up a fund structure.
Where the public pays.
Where the public pays, and you create that fund to scale up investment.
Okay.
Yeah. So in terms of the annuity program, I think it was a very good program when it was initiated. The biggest challenge on PPPs also is financing. Actually, that's where the biggest cost is. So the baseline of every PPP is the EPC cost, yeah, and the engineering, procurement, and construction of a project, which is pretty much like building a house, getting the house together, or a road together. That's the baseline cost. But once you set up the baseline cost, the biggest factor that comes in, and the financing cost can go up to 3 times the cost of the EPC over the depending on the tenure of the concession. Yeah. And before we went to the break, you actually commented on one thing: are we mortgaging our country, or are we selling our country using PPPs? I'll answer that one directly. The answer is no. Yeah. And there's a big misconception. And actually, I remember the last interview I came here, I started off giving the differential between privatization and PPPs. Yeah, because everyone sees it as one big family. They're actually they're not even families. They're not even cousins. They're very far apart. Yeah, the privatization is direct sale of public assets. Yeah, so same thing. I've got my phone here. I give it to you for 5K. That's a sale.
And
it becomes yours.
Yes.
Right? So this phone belongs to government. Right? I sell it to Tundu. She looks like a better pair. Sorry, gentlemen. I sell it Tundu. Government loses it. Yeah. It becomes just project.
Okay.
I mean, phone.
Yeah.
PPPs doesn't work that way. A PPP, the party runs the infrastructure for a limited period of time.
Okay.
Yeah. In Kenya, currently within the current laws, the maximum period is 30 years. Maximum. That's the outer side. Yeah. But how do you decide what period you give a concession? Yeah. In the past, I'll say this, and it has happened in many countries. You ask me about which countries have done good PPPs, which have done bad ones. There are very many bad examples. Yeah. And Kenya were at the risk of getting to that place too.
Of bad examples. And I talked about this last time, and I mentioned to you that if we had concluded the Nakuru Mau Summit Road, would have been bad example.
No, I would have won the most awards because of the project, a very big project implemented in Kenya. However, 7 years later, it would have been classified as the worst PPP project ever implemented in Africa.
Well,
Because?
One, affordability. So the cost for a small car was going to cost closely, and I'm using estimates here, it's not direct numbers. It was costing about, to use one way, 1,500. Now, I can tell you, my relatives don't have that cash. 1,500 to use 175 kilometers.
And then come back.
And coming back, and then when we go to Shads, what do? We carry shopping.
Yes.
Our relatives want what? Yeah. Some little money left back. Yeah. How many guys have that money?
And you're fueling the car.
Yeah. So I started looking at, and this is where a proper ESIA is so critical. And looking at this was done through
ESIA.
Sorry, once again, sorry. Yeah, thank you. Let me go back. Environmental, social impact analysis.
Okay.
Right? And this was a competitively procured project. This was not a PIP. So many bidders came to the table. Right? Now, when we evaluated the project, actually when I joined in, because that was one of the biggest mandates I was given, I was told I needed to close that project in 3 months. In 2 weeks, I looked at the costings, the affordability. 2 weeks. Actually, because I started on December 1st, 2020. Before we broke for Christmas, I were like, hapa kuna shida.
Your report was no.
I don't have that authority to just say no. But my advice
your advice was not the best route.
So what would have gotten there? That the feasibility study that one would assume it was done, but are we saying that to get to the point where you look and say, okay, this was not completed, and if it had been, it would have been the worst project in Africa? Would you point back to the feasibility study and say something was amiss here because they should have been able to project that from the study? So there was a faulty feasibility study done. However, somebody checked it off.
So what happens and on that aspect is, and I can tell you, it's not me. I work jointly with the team that I found there. It's not. There's no Superman I brought from someone or Superwoman. Yeah. So what I gave my team was just the elements they need to look at.
Okay.
Yeah. For us to come up with the proper analysis. Yeah. Now, when you do a feasibility and even when you do a PPP, the private party needs to give you all the components required. Like, for example, you tell me you're going to build a house. Yeah. Give me the BQs. Right. So you make a proper judgment call. Yeah. So when we got the detailed BQ, I can tell you this. I asked that from day one. Unfortunately, we received it a year later. Yeah. We received it a year later. And one of my staff, a very good gentleman, looked at the numbers. You look at cost of cement, it's X times what we supply. The market rate, right? So the affordability was based on the values the private party had quoted. And maybe they were quoting based on that increased additional risks because they are not in Kenya. Yeah. But this is where we add more value and where the law of 2021 brought in much more value, right? In future projects, those BQs need to be sent out to the public.
Okay.
Right? And that's where we scale up local content, right? And that's one big element that we need to ensure. And we need to drive that public interest whereby people see that, fine, you're going to do this project. Good, you'll do it. But you also...
You're sourced from
But show
the
people...
local market.
No, show the Kenyans these are the costings, right? These are the costings. I can now tell people that if you're selling cement for, let's say, 10,000 shillings, the market value is 5,000, for example, right?
People
A Kenyan will be willing to supply at 5,500. There's another one for 6,000. So we need to demonstrate this by scaling up local content, but being more transparent and actually pushing the private sector.
Okay.
And to my earlier point, the private sector is coming into this to make money. Yeah. So they will try as hard as possible to make the most
money.
If you've got a weak person on this side, yeah, if you've got a weak person on the government side, and who's not able to analyze these projects properly, yeah, you end up losing.
You would lose.
Yeah, and I'll give an example of a project that we've done. It's not the best example. It's like the airport. The EPC, we demanded it has to be done competitively.
What's that?
The procurement of the contractor, right? Normally, they would a private party will come in and tell you, we'll come with our own contractor. Yeah. So do you know what they do? They buff up a top up at the beginning. Yeah. So if I tell you I'm going to bid for the contractor, because you just share the BQs, the designs, and everything, and you show all parties, this is a project. What happens is, if the project was estimated to be, let's say, $1 billion, yeah, you'll end up getting the best deal from all parties.
Yeah.
Then secondly, the second level that we've enhanced is whoever wins also demonstrate those BQs.
Okay.
Yeah, to see how we can get real local content, not briefcase local content,
Right.
but proper local content,
thing.
yeah, into projects.
So, I mean, as uncomfortable as it is, Christopher, we cannot run away from this next part of the conversation, which is that when we hear things like this from the public, speculation is what is used to fill a vacuum. Now, whether it is a competitive, whether it is direct, whether it is restricted, or whether it is a PIP, there's information that needs to come to the public, because a lot of these projects end up in public use, public consumption, for public. And you talk about
public ends up paying for it.
Absolutely. You know, the loan, whatever it is, the usage is going to be paid by public. So public want to be aware of what is going on, right? There have also been claims of these projects and these partnerships being conduits for corruption, conduits for theft, conduits for off-color behavior. And that a lot of these things will be hidden in these reams and reams of paperwork that you discuss. How then do you ensure, or what are mechanisms used to ensure, I mean, if it's already done, that's too late, but to ensure that this theft, this corruption is either kept at bay or expunged completely?
Very good questions. Okay, and good points that you brought up. I think there are lessons learned. I'll start from that. And you look at the recent projects that have brought a lot of public scrutiny. Yeah. So there are methods we're going to do to ensure that, especially moving forward, right? That first, number one, let me say this: we list down the projects on our website. Yeah, but is that good enough?
No.
Thank you, because who goes to the website?
How many people even
No,
know about the website?
no. What is the address?
So we do have we list it out on our website, but also what we're going to do, also what we're engaging also with Parliament is how we involve them much more, so that you get more public awareness at an early stage. Yeah, so that's one aspect. So public involvement moving forward is something that obviously that has come up. Yeah. Could it have been done better? The answer is absolutely yes. I'm not going to put that below the carpet. Yeah. The second question about corruption, theft, and all that. Yeah. There are many things I'm good at. Financing. What do you call this? Now, matters of corruption. There's a lot of noise about their deals, side deals on projects and all that. That's an area we have avoided. Yeah. In terms of the discipline, actually, we have a code of conduct in PPP. Yeah. Similar like we had in Stanchart. Yeah. So our practice and behaviors, this comes in with individuals. Yeah. You cannot control everyone. Yeah. But within your space, as long as you create a proper governance structure, Yeah. Now, there are ways you can pick up whereby cost of projects are escalated. Yeah. There are methods you can pick up that. And you leverage on industry best practice. Yeah. We used to have a platform. It was an infrastructure. It was something like infrastructure core, some website that we used to use, where you look at benchmark projects, right, and see that if this you're doing a 10 million passenger airport, where else has a 10 million passenger airport been done elsewhere in the world?
Yeah.
That gives you a global benchmark to ensure that you see that are we paying a very
more.
rich price?
Yeah.
And you look at Nakuru Summit, we're able to pick that up, from the beginning.
Allow me to interject, because here there's something you mentioned. For example, some of these projects are going to use cement. You know the local cost of a bag of cement. One would assume that you're going to be using very many of these bags of cement, so the likelihood of the cost coming down would be great. Why then, in these studies, would you then say that if the cost of a bag of cement is 700 shillings, for example, just as an example, why would you allow in the study for to say that the cost of this same bag of cement, for example, is 2,000 shillings? Why would you?
No, the study
why would you do that?
The study will not say that. The study will actually give you a realistic ballpark figure of the project, right? Now, what happens is the private sector now goes and does they do the analysis and they come in and bid, right? So you get their bids, but normally when they send their bids, they put in a top up on top of that. But now for us, what we look at
where the top up,
the markup,
the markup to make profits. They will attempt as possible in any blind side you have
to make as much money as
make as much money as possible. My role is to ensure that they make a reasonable return, not a maximum return. The agenda is to make a maximum return, and by the way, the government's agenda this is a global practice, is for the investor to make no return. So your divergent views are like this.
Yes.
Yeah, the private sector, the government wants you make 0. This guy wants you to make 100. Yeah. So the thing here is you ensure that the investor makes just a reasonable return, and when they make their return, that's why now we come in and agree on the concession period. Yeah. So any investor will come in, even if a project is, let's say, 5 years, they'll attempt to get how many years?
30.
30.
The maximum.
Absolutely. So you get 30, and you get your money back in 5, get the 30, right? What's my job? To ensure that you get to
come 5
to your 5 years.
So is Adani above board, the Ketraco one?
Adani Ketraco?
Yes.
We've done, I can say this. The proposal initially came in at about $900 billion. The team who did the negotiations have landed at about $700 million. There's still some engagements on the transaction. The matter has gone to court. Yeah, it's been taken to court and allow the court process to go in. I don't want to touch on matters above my.
Okay.
Yeah.
Chris, thank you very much for joining us, for coming for this conversation. Well, before you go to Washington, come again.
With your invite,
there will be very many questions even now and into the next coming days as people watch this interview. So come and respond to those.
Absolutely, I'll be more than happy to come here. And thank you very much for having me here today. Thank you.
Christopher Kirigua is the Director General of the Public-Private Partnership Directorate at the National Treasury.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.